I'm Scott Kominers. I'm the Seraphim Rock Professor at Harvard Business School in the Entrepreneurial Management Unit, and also a faculty affiliate of the Harvard Department of Economics, as well as a research partner at A16Z Crypto. I study market design, and of late, especially questions of market design around Web3 and NFTs.
We are going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about NFTs, what they are, where they came from, how they affect branding, what physical digital counterparts are, and whether NFTs will be growing in the future, of which Scott is an expert. So could you give a 2 to 3 sentence description of NFTs?
Sure. So first of all, fundamentally, NFTs are like a digital deed. They're a digital ownership record that can be tied to other digital or even physical assets. For example, media files like images or music files, or even physical assets. Like one analogy I give often, or example, is you can imagine that a physical book might come with an ebook counterpart that's embedded as an NFT or be embedded via NFT. And so then you have, and literally there are products where there's an NFT sort of attached to a chip inside the physical product. You scan the chip and it gives you the digital counterpart. And if you pass along the physical book, someone can then claim the ebook along with it. One other key piece of information to think about here is like their ownership records, but where do they live? And NFTs are part of a different model of digital ownership from what we're used to experiencing. So in Web 2, sort of in classical web platforms, we often own digital goods inside of accounts that are embedded in those platforms, right? If you think about your music on iTunes or your ebooks, like sort of through Amazon, say, on a Kindle. The ownership sort of rests with, or even your Pokemon and Pokemon Go, like for Pokemon Go players out there, your ownership rests inside the platform, right? The songs live inside of iTunes, and the fact that you own them is sort of only managed by the platform. Your Kindle books live inside of Amazon's registry and database. Your Pokemon rather live inside of Pokemon Go. This is a model that we refer to as Web 2. Web 1, by the way, was the sort of web where you just like read things. You were a consumer. You were sort of like consuming information. Web 2 is right. You were able to like interface and sort of bidirectionally with platforms. In Web 3, of which NFTs are a critical building block, imagines a new model of the user and of the user account where you control an account that moves with you from platform to platform, sort of like the way your physical wallet, you can like take the stuff in it, sort of from one store to another, or from one, pull out a photo that you keep in your wallet or your ID and show it to anyone at any time. Similarly, in Web3, you have a central account, often called a digital wallet, that you bring from platform to platform, and it holds a bunch of ownership records and other data, and such as NFTs. So if I own, an NFT associated to an image, I can then go from platform to platform, and it can read my platform can read my digital wallet and like manifest that image in a variety of ways. It could show it as my social media profile picture. It could display it in a gallery. It could turn it maybe into a skin for a character in a role-playing game, any of the above.
So it really takes a lot of different pieces that would be like distributed in sort of like a multifarious way in Web 2, and sort of makes it easier to sort of use them. Like there's more utility to it in Web 3.
Yeah.
Does that make
So
sense?
it's a great way to think about it. So once you have control of your individual digital assets, and they live in a sort of platform architecture that's interoperable, exactly as you say, you can use them to do much more. Just like you might play a CD in any CD player, right? You could play it in a boombox, you could play it in your computer, you could play it, sort of take it to the office and play it there. Same thing here. It's like if you have NFTs associated to music files, you can play them, or in any individual website that can interface with and interpret them, and without having to like form a new account there and like obtain a new copy or something of the sort, right? So if I, for example, have an online game and I want to give out early access to everybody who holds a given category of NFT, all I have to do is set up my game to be able to interpret the NFTs in their wallets, in their digital wallets, and then when they log on, they connect their wallet, it reads to confirm they have the NFT, and then lets them into the game.
Right.
And so in this sense, you can build various forms of utility on top of simple ownership.
Diving in a little bit deeper to this sort of idea of digital physical counterparts and all of the spaces in which NFTs exist, both on the internet and tied to the physical world and physical products. Do you want to sort of talk about some of the best examples or some examples in general where you see NFTs in retail or the consumer space and how that's playing
Sure.
out?
Absolutely. Um, so we've seen both digitally native and sort of major established brands experimenting with digital physical product integrations through NFTs. For example, there's an NFT native digital brand called Pudgy Penguins, which has recently been selling a series of penguin toys. First in sort of first in venues like Walmart. More recently, I think now they're also in Target and maybe GameStop and some other places. Um, the toys, it's like it's a physical penguin toy, but it comes with access to sort of a digital counterpart, sort of like, items, traits, sort of like linked digital assets that you can then use sort of engaging in their digital platform experience. Um, Similarly, we've seen various streetwear brands producing either digital assets that give you access to physical assets, either sort of like membership tokens that give you early access to new product releases. The Hundreds was an early pioneer in this space. Nike has done the same, or physical assets that have digital twins. So like Nike through an NFT sub-brand it acquired called Artifact. Has this series of sneakers that have sort of associated digital twins, and the idea is that you can own a pair of sneakers in the physical and in you sort of like use an equivalent pair in like a metaverse world or sort of like in a digital environment. um, and more broadly, heck, by the way, my co-author Steve Kaczynski and I did a little bit of this with our recent book on NFTs. We actually issued a series of copies of the book that had a chip embedded in them that would let you claim a digital sort of asset associated with it. And the asset is book bound. So if you give your copy of the book to somebody else, they can tap the chip and like pull the digital asset away from you to them. So whoever
Oh, that is
owns the physical book owns the linked digital asset. And incidentally, we couldn't quite pull off doing this with ebook copies. Like the real dream is that you have like a physical book and an ebook that travel together as like a single asset. Um, the tech wasn't quite in place to do that on the ebook distribution side for our book, but I think within a couple of years we'll see this regularly, right? Like think about how many times you've bought a physical book and an ebook copy to read on the airplane on a Kindle or something of the sort. Here now you can imagine buying one book that is both.
right.
Um, and from the brand perspective, what this sort of stuff enables is really extraordinary, right? If you're a brand, especially like a consumer products brand with a significant enthusiast following, one of your dreams has been to be able to follow the customer past the point of sale, right? If you're a streetwear brand, like you have brand enthusiasts walking around, sort of advertising their enthusiasm for your brand, but you don't have touch points with them until they come back into the store or go back to your website. You have no idea how they're using your product, how frequently they're wearing it, whether they're interacting with other enthusiasts. And they, by the way, don't have a way to connect with the brand in the experience of using the product either. NFTs make it possible to like have these ongoing embedded experiences with the brand over time. The company we used for these books is a company called IYK, and they like manufacture these chips, and they also sort of serve a bunch of functions and modules for a brand to have ongoing interaction with the customer by way of the chip and the associated NFT, right? You could maybe make it so that every day you tap the chip and you get like a new update from the brand or like a short video or something of the sort. Um, and this addresses like a real challenge that has existed previously, which is that consumers have wanted to be able to bring their enthusiasm for brands into digital space. As we were talking about before, like the digital and physical are like melding together. They're sort of becoming much closer and more deeply integrated in terms of the consumer experience. But prior to NFTs, there really hasn't been tech, especially not general purpose and accessible tech, right? If you were maybe if you're a mega brand, you could have built this inside of your own website. But to be able to, give any brand the ability to interact with the customer and their experience of the product in physical and digital space over time, that's never existed before, and it's really powerful.
That is so fascinating. How does that sort of contribute at the level of both, the consumer and then potentially at the level of the brand itself to this idea of psychological ownership, to like this idea of
Yeah,
part of a brand?
it's a great question. So another thing that's really special about NFTs relative to other categories of digital assets is that they embed a more true sense of ownership. Um, we talked earlier about what were the examples? So we talked about like, songs like in iTunes or Spotify, ebooks like in Kindle or something of the sort, and on the Amazon platform, and Pokemon in Pokemon Go. In all of these settings, the digital asset lives inside the platform, which means your ownership is sort of controlled by the platform. You might have some rights, to a reimbursement or something if the digital good disappears, or if the platform goes down. But fundamentally, the platform has control over the asset and controls how you use it. You can only use it inside of their platform or with a specific set of partners that they've allowed to access their API. NFTs give you direct control and ownership, right? If you have, digital trading cards embedded as NFTs, even if the creator of the trading cards goes out of business, you still have those digital assets and can keep using them, and you can use them however you want. You could play a game with them in a game platform. You could display them in a gallery. And so it restores a lot of the physicality that we're used to with like physical ownership, right? Like you own a t-shirt because you have that t-shirt, and in most circumstances nobody can just take it away from you, and certainly the brand can't. Similarly here, you have ownership because the digital asset is yours. You control it, and it exists independent of the creator and or the creator's platform. And then, sort of you asked about like brand attachment, level of ownership, really is important for creating psychological ownership, right? Like if you know that the thing is yours and you control it, that's a lot more concrete than if you sort of have like permission to use it inside of the brand's own website and only there. But even more than that, this form of ownership really, we talked earlier about identity, right? It really encourages and enables people to form personal identity around the asset, right? It's like in the same way, you might form personal identity around your favorite t-shirt or your favorite hat or something of the sort. Here you can form, sort of identity around your favorite digital fashion. And again, that could be like, a digital shirt or a digital hat, but also it could be like the image you use as your profile picture, right? The way you present yourself online becomes part of your identity. And you're empowered to build, sort of identity around it in a way that reinforces your attachment to the brand, right? Every time you interact with that digital asset, you're reinforcing your own brand attachment and your connection to the brand entity.
Right. Do you think that both increases and reduces the power of the brand itself, in the sense that the brand
Yeah,
has slightly less control over basically like what it looks like within the world, but then it also has a lot just more distribution, right? Like it just exists.
yep,
It basically has like more free advertising, in the sense that it has more people being that brand or using that brand in different ways in a
totally.
constant sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should be clear, that doesn't mean that the brand can't have terms of service, right? So a lot of early NFT-based brands gave their token owners a form of intellectual property rights to like, use and vary and like, remix the imagery or other media associated with their NFTs. And then when established brands started entering the space, they would give people ownership of the asset, but often not share those intellectual property rights, right? Like the hundreds, their first big NFT collection was a collection of images of the mascot of their brand, the Atom Bomb, throughout history. And while you owned this digital collectible, you did not own the rights to the Atom Bomb. ADAM, by the way, not ATOM. Yeah, critical to spell it out on video because they sound kind of similar. The it's possible the name is a pun. I've never actually asked Bobby Hundreds. We should think about that. But so critically, like you can still maintain some control over how the asset is used. But as you say, like you're still relinquishing a lot of control at the same time, right? Like you're not restricting ways in which the person can manifest that digital asset in different platforms. You're in fact giving like sort of a public API that's open and committed to be open. And as you say, that introduces some challenges, right? It's like you're giving people control over the way your assets are used in digital space, which is similar to the way that you might give them control over how they're used in physical space, right? Like you can't stop someone from wearing a The Hundreds t-shirt into a given music venue, even if you happen to not particularly like that musical artist. At the same time, as you say, there's much more distribution, right? That's sort of you're opening up many more possibilities of using those assets and like engaging with the brand in different ways. And moreover, ownership comes with some incentive effect, right? If you're an owner of an asset, like if you sort of like own a little tiny slice of the brand, like a real brand asset, you're incentivized to help build the brand however you can. And NFTs, again, as we talked about, enable that sort of third party and community based value creation. And so the hope is that sort of giving access to digital assets and sort of like giving people true ownership of them doesn't just enable them to interact with the brand in new ways, but even more drives them to build brand value in a way that's like positive and value creating for everyone.
Right. So it's basically just a win-win, is what you're saying.
That's certainly, at least it has the opportunity to be. There are many early experiments, like not all uses of these products are or will be successful, but there's this tremendous potential for win-win value creation.
Right. So, all right. So something that I'm very curious about this is with extremely large brands, like with luxury brands, how
Yeah.
does basically this filter down across the levels of, every single part of the supply chain, every single thing that contributes to the creation of something like, a Gucci bag, and the fair trade, the fair work rights, everything that's involved in that. How does an NFT sort of contribute to a better and more healthy ecosystem?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it's funny actually. One of the earliest applications of private blockchains was in supply chain management, right? That this is just also like a good technology for like managing, like a blockchain is a decentralized database, and it's a particularly good technology for managing like information flows and sort of securely and robustly managing information flows as like good progresses through many stages of creation and so forth and distribution. Um, we're now starting to see that as well to some degree on public blockchains, where people are investing in technologies that make it possible to track the actual production process and sort of like bring a lot of information about how a good was produced, how it was distributed, and so forth on chain as part of the like provenance of the good. Um, and then again, right, like you can sort of see the complete transaction flow. You can see like where the good has, sort of where the good has moved since being created and distributed. And so we're starting to see NFTs as a way of like almost being like an identity record for a good, attesting to its production process, attesting to its, quality and fair, sort of like fair labor standards and so forth in its production. And then that information like sort of anchors to the good and could travel with it. And again, in the same way we've talked about for NFTs as records of ownership, this sort of like contains like the record of identity that travels with the good to whoever the owner is.
So it's an accountability system almost, like it becomes more of an accountability system.
Yeah, exactly. And again, you have to build those on-ramps, right? You need to be able to like securely and verifiably, sort of confirm the information that's then going on chain. But once it's on chain, everyone can follow it and access it and trust it, sort of as a reference to the original on-ramp.
Wow. Kind of one big question.
Yeah.
The biggest question.
Oh gosh.
uh, what do you think? So to the future, NFTs have sort of slumped in the last like 2 or so years. What do you think sort of this next wave of NFTs will look like within the Web3 space? And then,
Great.
both alongside any regulatory framework?
So first of all, we've seen, we saw a lot of early experiments with different uses of the NFT technology. And actually, like, over the past several years, we've been seeing the use of NFTs mature into something like much more concrete and sort of clearly thought through as a branding strategy.
Mhm.
But at the same time, another thing that's happened and continuing to happen is that the technological rails for the consumer are getting much easier to use, right? Like a big challenge for the accessibility of digital assets, including NFTs, has been that for many use cases, you actually have to own what's called a digital wallet. Oh, we have this. In many cases, you have to own a digital wallet that in some way interfaces directly with the blockchain and surfaces a lot of information that the ordinary consumer wouldn't normally want to process or deal with. You have to make decisions about the speed of your transactions confirmation on the blockchain, which is corresponds to deciding on a transaction fee for running the computational processing, right? This is not ready for the ordinary consumer use case. But we're starting to see much more accessible, often custodial wallet solutions for ordinary consumer uses. And in parallel with that, we're seeing applications much more targeted at ordinary consumers. And so certainly digital collectibles and brand assets is one of them. And platforms like Reddit or Nike's .swoosh have sold very large numbers of NFT collectibles of different forms this way. But even more, I think we're going to see NFTs starting to become embedded in very simple, ordinary consumer use cases. So for example, my co-author Steve and I also often talk about digital tickets, NF tickets. And the reason for this is people buy digital tickets all the time for events, concerts, Broadway shows, whatever, sporting events. But the form factor of a digital ticket at the moment is a QR code in your email, which is maybe okay if you're buying it just for yourself. But if you later want to resell the ticket or you want to buy one on the secondary market, there's a tremendous need for trust, right? You have to believe that someone is not selling that same QR code to 5 other people, because there's no way to verify that once the QR code is sold to you, they haven't also sold it to someone else.
Right.
NFTs completely solve this problem, right? If you have an NFT ticket, the sale process is a single integrated software process where payment transfers from you to the ticket holder and the ticket transfers from them to you in a single transaction. The one software process does both of them simultaneously. If either part fails, they both fail. And once you have control of the ticket, you can verify that you have control of it and you know that nobody else does. And so NFTs are just a strictly superior solution for digital ticketing.
It's almost why didn't it exist that way in the first place?
Right. And the reason was there wasn't a good technology for it, right? It's sort of without a way of defining digital assets like this, you actually just can't do it. Or you can, but you need very complex platform architecture. And Ticketmaster has invested a ton of time and effort
just resold a ticket last week on Ticketmaster, so
right. And you had to use the Ticketmaster internal platform because there wasn't a way to do it without that. Which limits the sort of the available potential buyer or seller market. But also it was actually complicated to build that functionality because Ticketmaster is basically implementing the functionality of an NFT inside of their system, right? They're using their platform to make these digital assets individually unique.
Right.
For anyone to do that. If I'm, throwing sort of a local Dungeons and Dragons game and I want to create 5 tradable sort of tradable character memberships, I can just do that, spinning up an NFT platform. I don't need to be large enough to access Ticketmaster to manage my events. So things like that, really simple individual use cases. Another really one that it's funny, 9 months ago wasn't in the top of people's minds, but today really is. In a world of AI fakes and sort of increasing complexity and precision of AI fakes, the need to be able to identify yourself to any online platform has increased. And so the idea that we might have an NFT that is our private, non-transferable, just our personal digital identity, that maybe you go to the DMV when they give you your driver's license, they also give you your digital driver's license. and you control this digital asset. It interoperates. It can be accessed by any platform. All you do is connect your digital wallet, press a button, and then it verifies who you are, who you say you are. Those types of things I think are going to be very powerful and become popular.
God, it's almost like a new social security number in a sense. It's like
Ha!
a new,
I
it's a
mean,
new complete identity.
in some sense, yes. Like what it is NFTs make it possible to create an individually owned digital record. And that can be lots of things, right? It can be a ticket to an event. It can be, the ownership rights to an image. Or it could be like, a personal identity record. All of these things, the critical feature is that you are, like uniquely as the individual or any platforms you permission have control. And you can use it flexibly across any platform. And so in that sense, it is very much like a government issued ID, right? Like a government issued ID is backed by a government and it has a bunch of features that like prove it is the type of ID it's supposed to be. And that's how you can use it in any place, right? You can walk into, a restaurant and prove your identity by showing your driver's license. You can also like, sort of prove that in a healthcare institution. Like they all recognize in some sense, they can interact with the information from the government ID. This is the same. And it's this blockchain-based NFT infrastructure that enables you to do it the same way in digital space. Maybe one footnote. Sorry, I know there's a really long-winded answer, but a key footnote here, like, is with regards to consumer adoption. One of the things that's really cool about Web3 is that once you have a digital wallet, right? Once you have one of these accounts that enables you to interact with Web3 assets, you can flexibly use that to interact with all these different types of assets. It's not like where if you join Facebook, okay, now you're into social media, but if you want to also post on Twitter, you have to create a separate account. Here it's like, if you get a digital wallet for the sake of owning an NF ticket, right? You're going to a concert, the concert happens to be distributing tickets as NFTs, you get your first digital wallet. Now you can use that digital wallet for lots of other stuff. You can use it in online games. You can use it for like, for social, like digital social media, like for Web3 social media, because you have this one central account that you can use flexibly across all the different platforms. And so as people onboard to any one of these applications, they sort of gain access to the whole family of them.
Right. So it's easier in a sense that, well, it's far easier in the sense that basically you just have everything at your fingertips with one click as opposed to a bajillion different clicks. Although I'm sure like it's also, that centralization also prevents some of what is the benefit of, having decentralized platforms in the sense that you are able to do different things in different places and you're able to apply yourself in different things in different places.
So actually one key component that really has to be built out, and we're starting to see the software solutions for this right now, is individualized permissioning across applications, right? Like right now, for a lot of Web3 account formats, it's sort of all or nothing. Like you sort of connect to an application or you don't. And you can think of lots of reasons why you might not want the thing that lives in your like, decentralized social media equivalent of Facebook to also live in your decentralized equivalent of LinkedIn. And so the solutions now sort of, they're a combination of both like sort of federated wallets that have sort of like layers of aggregation and permission, and permissioning, and also just like direct permissioning systems to let you control which assets are shared with a given platform. Like that's an active tech development stage right now, but I think it is really critical for the sort of like full consumer experience to make sense.
How is like a company like Meta though? I mean, how do they see this as affecting basically the functionality and the rights that they have to sort of being able to decide, how a consumer does or doesn't use their platform?
It's a great question. And I don't know how Meta specifically is thinking about this. They've certainly experimented with different Web3 integrations over time, and I don't know what their current thinking is. But if you're a large centralized platform, I think on the one hand, like Web3 presents a tremendous challenge to your business model, right? Like it, creates this opportunity that there may be sort of competing platforms and where users can sort of like flexibly engage and sort of pass information and assets across platforms. Like there is right now like a sort of a series of, or there are a series of decentralized social media platforms that have form factors similar to the Twitters and Facebooks of the world. except that all of the information like it resides in an account that you control and can be used flexibly across different clients, different front ends. So like Farcaster is a decentralized social media protocol that has a front end that looks very sort of like similar to what we're used to from the likes of Twitter, but also has front ends that like turn it into a questing game, and front ends that like, sort of like let you sort of manage like all of your like sort of Farcaster information in like sort of a big dashboard. Like, um, and so different people can like build new ways of interpreting and aggregating and letting you interface with the same underlying social media data and feed and so forth. Um, you know, on the one hand, like that is like a sort of a potential threat to the Web2 platform model, and I do think it's possible actually that we might see Web3 platforms in these categories sort of grow to be greater, like create more value for the consumer and the user sort of over time. At the same time, I think if you're a social media giant in the Web2 era, there's tremendous opportunity to letting some of this stuff in, right? That like, you are a place where people are spending their time, right? Like you are sort of a core component of people's embedded digital, like sort of lives.
Mhm.
And to the extent that more and more of those lives will interact with digital assets that serve as identity and community anchors, like being able to capture a lot of that activity on your platform, I think is really powerful. Um, and so on the one hand, like there's a challenge, which is that, Web3 like offers a very different business model and strategic toolkit relative to Web2 that puts a lot of pressures on the things that like the walled garden model that has been so successful in Web2. On the other hand, the most successful Web2 platforms are the ones that have, or are among the platforms that have most leverage to take advantage of this type of activity and sort of get a lot of value for it and create a lot of value for the consumer.